Happy Friday. Beautiful day out here in San Francisco. And it's a beautiful day to also talk about reframing diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is Gabrielle Blackwell, or GB. I'm the moderator for today's conversation. And here I have some guests with me: Ryan, Shelton, Roderick, Amy, Jacob. Brooklyn's in the background here. But I'll give a little introduction to the topic, and then I'll ask the panelists here to give a round of introductions for themselves, and also maybe talk through what is your stake or what is your investment in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So real briefly, a few weeks ago, or about a month or so ago, I was doing an event alongside Galen Gurmai, Nikki Ivy, Michael White, and it was 4 Black women in a Zoom room talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we recognize hey, it can't just be the typically underrepresented minorities who are speaking out about diversity, equity, inclusion, and the challenges that we're facing. But really what we're wanting to see is the people who are in positions of sales leadership, typically, right, the white men of the world, right, who are in these positions, talking through what is their personal and professional journey, and being able to cultivate spaces that are equitable and inclusive for the traditionally overlooked or untapped areas of talent. So I didn't only want to have that perspective. I also wanted to bring in other perspectives of folks who are doing the work to help dismantle inequity or in access to folks who would otherwise, again, be overlooked or untapped, such as Shelton, Jacob. Roderick's doing this work as well, and he's also an executive person. So this is my crew of peeps that I wanted to have a conversation around this. So I'll stop talking and I will ask Shelton first. Would you be open again to giving a little introduction about yourself? And again, what is your stake in DE&I?
Yeah, so a little introduction. So Shelton Banks, everybody. Hello, Chicago native. So here in the Windy City, all my life, got my start in the banking industry and transitioned into the tech sales industry. So Group Honor, followed by Sprout Social Guide. So collectively, I got a little bit over 10 years of experience selling and a little bit of management in between. And now I lead a nonprofit organization called Rework Training. And I'm also the co-founder of Sales for the Culture. For me, having this experience and not seeing people that look like me and hearing the millions of excuses and just the general rhetoric around diversity and inclusion, I'm all in. So, I've lived it firsthand. I've seen the barriers coming from, again, the South Side of Chicago, not having a college degree, being a high school dropout. I've seen the barriers and was able to elevate. And so, my stake is I'm all in, and I'm trying to remove the same barriers that I face so that the people behind me don't have to make the same mistakes. And hopefully the leaders won't have to make the same mistakes, repeat the same mistakes over again when it comes to diversity and inclusion, especially in the sales space.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelton. And Ryan, maybe you can go next.
Hello, everyone. Very honored to be here. So thanks to Sales Hacker and GB for hosting. So I think for me, so actually just a little bit of background on me. So right now I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Gong. And before this, I spent 10 years at LinkedIn in various roles. And I think I've had the opportunity and the privilege to be educated in the corporate setting on the importance of, we called it DIBS at LinkedIn, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, call it DEI now at Gong. But on a number of occasions, just kind of had more corporate education experiences around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. But I think my broader history is I grew up, I'm here in the Bay Area. I grew up in a very white, affluent neighborhood in the North Bay called in Marin County, and didn't have much experience with diverse communities at all until I went to UC Berkeley. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's a world out there. And it was, it was painful in terms of a number of relational occasions when I kind of figured out that not everybody thinks like me, and background matters, and I know it sounds basic, but when you've never experienced it before, it's not. And so, I went through a journey on that, and then have been blessed enough to marry a woman who was born in a refugee camp in Hong Kong. She's half Chinese, half Vietnamese. And so we have cultural moments all the time, realizing the importance of culture in my very home. And now I'm raising two beautiful girls that I want to have all the opportunities in the world. So I think deeply personal from a number of different areas. And then I think also just as a business leader, I think if you're not creating diverse teams, you're not setting your teams up to win. You're not setting your companies up to win in the same way that you can when you have diverse teams. So I think there's a moral, a personal, and a deeply business angle to this for me as well. But I'll stop now and turn the mic back over.
Ooh, thank you, Ryan. I'm going to double click on some things later on. But before we do, Roderick, would you be open to giving an introduction and your stake in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Absolutely. It actually falls along the same lines as where Ryan was, except for I didn't grow up in an affluent all white neighborhood, but close. I actually grew up in the projects down in Texas and Louisiana. So I was the diametric opposite of where Ryan grew up. And what I saw was a lot of folks that looked like me, not a whole lot of diversity until I moved to California later in life. And like Ryan, everything opened up. I was like, wow, there's mixing and mingling and all kinds of things that weren't happening down in the deep South. So a little about me from a professional perspective. I am now the VP of Field Enablement at Netscope, which is a cybersecurity company. But to double tap on that and how I got here, I have been in sales for about 30 years now. And I started out as a BDR. I've been an AE, got promoted to sales leader, all that fun stuff. And I have been running sales training, sales enablement, sales effectiveness, productivity. I think I've won just about every title in the last 25 years. And so Ryan, I've been blessed to have a great career at Siebel Systems, Network Appliance, PayPal, HP, Oracle, Salesforce, and Marketo. So it's been a pretty good ride up until 3 years ago, where I decided to open up my own business. And I was consulting for about 3 years and had fun there. And I didn't mean but, I think that sounded bad. So I decided to go into the consulting world to round out my skill set. And also, I felt like I was getting a bit too ivory towered on the executive side. And so decided to go back and roll my sleeves up. My stake in this is similar to Shelton. I have lived this. I've walked through this. I have questioned our hiring practices in different companies, our recruiting practices. I've questioned why I'm not seeing more diversity. And I don't mean just color. When I say diversity, I'm talking about color, ethnicity, sexual orientation across the board. What I look for and what I see as success is diversity of thought. And whenever you don't have those, that mix of all the other pieces that fall into DE&I, what happens is everyone walks and talks and thinks alike. So at the end of the day, my stake is this. As I've grown up in this corporate world, what I've realized is there is a lot of opportunity out there. So there's equity in talent, but there is not equity in opportunity and access. And I'm here to break down those barriers.
Okay, I'm over here just taking notes because there's questions, right? I see Amy, you're smiling over here. I'll pass it over to you for your introduction.
I'm just laughing because, we all talk about our differences, and that's always what strikes me in inclusion and diversity. But listening to all of you who have spoken so far, I'm like, so Ryan, I currently live in Marin. I grew up in a very white neighborhood down in Southern California. I went to UC Berkeley, probably much earlier than you did. And I have 3 daughters that I'm trying to set an example for. Roderick, I spent 30 years in sales. I'm in cybersecurity. I'm a go-to-market leader now for a division of our products, global go-to-market leader. I was leading our inside sales organization for about 3 years prior and came from Salesforce, Cisco, started my career in telecommunications, did some work at AT&T, and owned my own business like you did, Roderick. I took a little jaunt away from corporate America, same thing. Thought I need to get closer to people. And that's really when I realized, when I had spent these 30 years in a very male dominated industry, starting with telecommunications, and I was in cable, switches, routers, all of that. I used to sit at the table and think, how did I get here? First of all, the technology was over my head in many cases. And then there was nobody there that looked like me. And I thought, what can I do? What can I do to change this? And then have my own 3 daughters, and one is still in school, 2 are out, and both went into technology initially. And really think I have, every day women come to me and say, how did you do this? As if there is a recipe. I'm not sure there is. I think the recipe is hard work and perseverance. And to Roderick's point, it isn't, diversity isn't just this a race issue or a gender issue or this issue or that. It is about diversity of thought. And that comes from a broad reach of people and communities. And, that's why I'm so excited to participate in conversations here and make connections and all of that, because that's really where the magic happens, is when we come together and realize how similar we are and celebrate our differences. But sometimes I don't think we celebrate where we cross over and how relatable every single one of us is to the other. And so that's what I'm so passionate about, is building relatable stories, because that's when we thrive, when we can see that not only where we're different, but how are we the same? Because oftentimes their conflict can come from differences, but in our differences, we also share some similarities. So I can get pretty esoteric and philosophical, but that's really my efforts. And I'm grateful to work for a company who's made this, very, very important topic front and center. And, I know, Gabrielle, you and I talked about it earlier, and we'll get deeper into that, but I'm very honored to be with this group.
Oh, yes, I'm honored too. And again, y'all are giving me lots of notes that I can take. But before I get too excited, I can't wait to pass it over to my bro, Jacob. What's going on? Want to give a little introduction and kind of what's your stake in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, thanks, Gab. So my name's Jacob Geberwold. I wear 2 hats, and I think one of them is probably very unique in this conversation. I'm an individual contributor, and so I'm an account executive at Clue. We do competitive enablement, and so I think in a certain level, sales leaders are trying to figure out, how do I understand the perspective of including people, I'd say, like me. So one thing I bring into this conversation is maybe that voice on the ground. A kid of 2 Ethiopian refugees, did not grow up with maybe all the golf and country club opportunities, let's say, but came into sales, started as a BDR at a payments company, did selling in advertising and recruiting for accounting and finance, and then eventually made my way into tech. And I think there's also an ingredient here of, in our game, understanding that people with different sorts of backgrounds and experiences coming to the table, both like racially, of course, like that's a big ingredient in the conversation. But tech is looking to access exceptional talent that hasn't been in this industry before and bring that into the game. And so I was one of those people that Clue looked at and bet on, and said, even if you don't have the 5+ years of software SaaS experience or whatever that was, like, we see the thing that you've got. And I've been able to ramp in my cohort faster than people that came from big tech logos. So I say that's one part of the conversation. Other part of the conversation is I'm one of the co-founders of Sales for the Culture, executive director of that, and helping lead to make sure that we're getting more people who are Black, both into tech sales, but also crucially making sure that we see ourselves empowered in tech sales, seeing ourselves at the highest levels of success and seniority, to know that we can do that too. And then not just to feel empowered, but to feel equipped, to know that we don't just see this pie in the sky thing that someone else has done that looks like us, but we're actually being helped and mentored on how to level up from, whether we're an SDR, wanting to be an AE, or an AE wanting to be a more tenured AE, or even move into management, or moving up the ranks of management, to be equipped for that success. And then, of course, to participate in these conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, facilitating that sense of belonging, so that we have a seat at the table and we feel like we belong at that table. And so that's what we've been doing. Lots, I'm sure we'll get into further about Sales for the Culture, but in a lot of that, I guess, kind of leadership capacity as well. So I kind of wear the both hats of the IC and the leader, and towing that line. So I feel like there'll be lots to chat about to that end, but that's me.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. And I already see Cynthia Silva's already submitted a question here, but if there are questions that you have top of mind before we actually get into the meat of the conversation, please, please, please do put that in the chat and we'll make sure to attend to that. I think this is something that got that kind of kicking off the conversation. This is I think about the experiences that I've had working in tech sales for the past 6 years or so. And funny enough, at Gong, we actually had an inclusive hiring training earlier today. Ryan and I were like slacking back and forth, right? Because there can be so many times where companies have strategies, right? They have programs, they're investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And nonetheless, you still see that even if you have representation of, again, like traditionally overlooked communities coming in, there is that like leaky faucet of folks coming out, right? For whatever reason that is. I've had my own experiences of being in organizations where it's like, yes, diversity, equity, inclusion, we want your voice, we want your work, right? And then when I start using it, they're like, not so much, right? So and I'm gonna maybe pass it to Roderick first, only because uh in thinking about, right, just that piece of we can bring people into organizations, right? We can say we're a diverse organization, but yet we're not really setting people up to be empowered. We're not really setting people up to be successful or to have their voices heard or for them to come in with their full selves. But I would love to hear your take on maybe even just the difference between diversity and inclusion and the way that you describe it to folks.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to start. So here's how I describe it. Diversity is about being invited to the table. Equity is about being able to order off the menu. Inclusion is about everybody sitting in the same booth and eating together. So, there's a bunch of different ways to look at this. And I look at it from the corporate lenses of what are we doing to make sure that we are showing, and I'll say this, I work in a company that, similar to what Amy said, we're living this right now. And what are we doing to show that we're doing this? And so I've got kind of 6 things to answer to Cynthia's question, 6 separate categories where I think that DE&I can be shown, not just talked about. And before I say that, I'm not talking about in the Silicon Valley sense of we've moved from 1% to 2%, so we should go throw and party. No, I'm talking about truly living and embodying what DE&I means. So I'd start with equity in hiring practices to make sure that you've got a diverse mix of middle management, of executives, of senior executives, and also your board roles. Because if I'm looking for a job, and the first thing all of us are going to do is we're going to look at LinkedIn to see who we know there, then we're going to go look at their website, right? And if I don't see anyone that has my haircut, that says to me, you probably don't want us there. If I don't see diversity across gender and ethnicity, et cetera, then I'm thinking maybe it's not the right place for me. The second is about inclusive mentorships, right? Expand your recruiting internships, hiring across things like HBCUs, and looking at non-traditional places where you would normally go. The problem that I've seen in Silicon Valley is we recruit the same people that walk, talk, and think alike. And what happens? You're not creating diversity, you're creating an echo chamber. So we have to smash those things. When I go through hiring, I always say I want to see X number of diverse. I don't say Black or Hispanic or Latino or Asian. I say I want to see a diverse mix of candidates. If you can't do that, then maybe I need to go back and reassess what that job description looks like. The next is an education against racism. And I mean institute things like implicit bias training. We all do the, managing legally and ethically and all the things that we need to do. I'm going to challenge HR organizations and people organizations to not only do things that are going to be and I'll call it CYA for the company in case we get sued, you can say, well, they took the test and they passed it. No, I want you to take a step further than that and really go down into the organization and find out how are people doing their job? Not just are they happy with it, but what can we do different? We're always focused on what can we do better. Let's change the narrative and let's start asking questions like, what can we do differently than what we're doing now? The next is build a community of collaboration. That means build a diverse pipeline of future leaders. As we're moving up, it can't be in sales just because you were a rock star, you get moved up. Actually, that's probably one of the worst reasons to promote someone because you've done 2 things. One, you've taken them out of a territory that's covered. And secondly, they have no skills as far as being a manager. So put in a high potential program that really focuses on building up a diverse pipeline of candidates. Next is in your marketing practices. If I'm internal to a customer, I'm looking at our company pitch, I'm looking at our collateral, and everyone looks the same, and especially if it's a white male with the same haircut, guess what? You're not talking to me. And the world is more diverse, so we can't go out and talk to prospects and customers with one look in our collateral. And finally, then I'll hand this off. Invest in entrepreneurship. And what I mean is in minority and women-owned businesses. If we don't give them a shot and bring them up, who will? And I'll give an example. When I was consulting, I was blessed enough, my company was brought in to do a consulting engagement with a large segment of American Express. Not until we had completed that did I hear these words from my stakeholder. Do you realize that your consulting company is the first in the 150-year history of American Express to be a minority-owned company to complete an engagement of consulting here? One, I was ecstatic, and at the same time, I was frustrated as hell. Why did it take this long to get there? There are some steps that I've given that you can go right now and put in place. And as we get deeper into this later, I've got some steps that what you can do as an individual. But from a company perspective, I hope I've answered that question thoroughly.
You have, I was like, I can go so many places with this. I know, and I see Shelton over here smiling as well. I don't know if you had, I don't know if anyone has initial thoughts to what Roderick was sharing. I'll leave space for this, and if not, I do have a question otherwise.
Before we go on, I want to say something. I've been remiss, and while we're on this topic, I have to say this: if we don't include disabled in diversity, then we're not really talking about diversity. We're talking again about people that we are comfortable or uncomfortable with, or that are in our circle. So let's not leave out the disabled piece as well. And I'm not talking about just, oh, can we get a ramp? Do we have to make allowances for you? No. What can we do, as I said earlier, to do things better, or excuse me, different, not just better? Sorry, want to add that piece in.
No need to be sorry whatsoever. I know we had someone in the chat, Matthew, right, who had spoken to this point. And I know from my end, right, I am absolutely no expert, and I still have a learning journey for myself. And right, it's like, hey, like how to widen my kind of consciousness and my awareness in order to really be like as inclusive as I can be. So no, that's a great point, Roderick.
I was just gonna say, for anyone that was worried this was going to be a light, fluffy webinar, there's some meat right out of the gates for you. That's all.
100%, 100%.
I think just to add to Roderick's point about diversity, if you've seen that diversity wheel where it kind of has like able-bodied, like it describes like people. You know, when I think of diversity, I just think of the variety of adjectives that describe people, right? Where it's like so many. I think it covers like 14, 15 different buckets, and we can all, whether you're slim or larger, like that, the variety of adjectives that describe people is kind of what diversity is to me when I think about it. I think about that wheel.
Yeah, and I might just add something to that, Shelton. I think that's a really great point. And many times those are the things that we see. Think about, and I have a vision of a slide that, you know, we've all probably seen, the iceberg slide, and it can be used in many different things. What's above and what's below. And so that's when you think about the things around implicit bias that you spoke of, Roderick, is what is it? What are the things that we don't see that, you know, are aspects of diversity that we may not even know is going on with someone and in their lives or their background, or something that prevents them from doing something? You know, people come to the table with PTSD and different things that we may not see on the surface. And are we giving allowances for people? I think this shelter in place has given, I believe, an opportunity for us to be more real and to be human. And I think it's just a tremendous opportunity. And, you know, and to Matthew's point, like, if you have a disability and you're working from home, easy peasy, like you don't need to make as many accommodations that might be barriers. And so now more than ever, I believe, we can make some very big strides that maybe we have found excuses not to in the past, because it's hard. But we have to do the hard work. And to Roger's point, go to the specific colleges. I received an email today from someone who is from an Asian college saying, what can you do, you know, to help us? And so just different aspects of the same message.
Yeah,
I love that. Sorry, Sheldon, go ahead.
I was gonna say the plus one to Amy's point. So on that diversity wheel, I had to pull it up. It talks about external dimensions and internal dimensions, right? So like you mentioned, age is another one, right? So ageism is a thing, right? Where people like that variety of adjectives we can like throw in physical ability, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, race, like those internal factors that make people who they are, like that's diversity, right? Whatever point you are on that map, however many points you touch on that map, that's diversity.
Yeah. And diversity cannot be an organization in your company, right? It has to be woven into the fabric of your company from the highest points, from your board, from your C-level, from your executives, all the way down, because I firmly believe that if it's in your culture, then it'll happen. But now here's the funny thing. Culture is what happens when no one is watching. It's not what you put on your website. It's not what you put on your collateral. It's what people either put positive or negative on Glassdoor, on other pieces. So we don't own that, but we own the ability to drive that piece and model the positive behavior around it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I can maybe hop in here, as an individual contributor, right? Like I've been fortunate to have good relationships with leadership, maybe far past me on the org chart and most of the orgs that I've been in. But for 99.9% of like people, a lot of what you think of the leadership of your company has more to do with what your immediate relationship is like with your manager, or maybe your manager's manager. Like that's going to shape a lot of your experience and perspective. So I'm not saying that your CEO shouldn't put out, a press release or whatever when something happens in the Black community. Like I'm not saying that you shouldn't have, someone who is heading up initiatives in the C-suite. Like, yeah, go ahead and do those things. But at the end of the day, if my manager didn't see it as part of his responsibility, not just like in my case, but just like in general, like part of doing my job well is building a team. And my team, I want to be diverse for all of the good reasons, moral, personal, and business, like Ryan had mentioned earlier, for all those good reasons. Like, this is my responsibility. This is not just like some corporate objective. Like this is me. And then take that responsibility and go and put in the work to hire and build and lead a diverse team. If you can do that, I mean, that would be a miss. So I think a lot of this conversation, we want to get like practical takeaways. I won't pull out a list of 6 like Roderick had, but if companies started to think of, instead of just making DE&I this macro conversation, making it a very micro conversation at each of the leaders' levels, and people took that as personal responsibility and part of their role, whether it's how they go and prospect and recruit for people, right? Or whatever. I think that'd be a massive shift to see in our game.
Absolutely. And Ryan, I saw you come off of mute a few times, so I wanted to create the space for you to share.
Yeah. Man, I have so many thoughts. The one that I was thinking through earlier when I came off mute the first time was, I feel like at a company, when you've decided something's important, what's not mysterious is what you do next, right? Like what you do next in any case where you have a priority is you set a clear target. You then figure out how to measure against that target. You then talk as a team about what it looks like to achieve those goals that you're going after. If you don't have the internal expertise, then you go externally and you find the expertise, or maybe you go within your company and find the expertise. But like there's this rallying around an objective that we all really know how to do really well within companies. And so I think oftentimes, we ask the question, and I ask this too, but it's farther down the list. It's farther down in the process, which is like, what are the practical things that we do? I think that I would bubble it up and say, it should feel like any other priority that you have in the company, where you get clear about what's important, you rally the leadership team around it, you set some targets, you measure against those targets, it's deployed throughout the organization, like those types of rhythms. Like I think for a number of different reasons, I think that's not kind of the clarity of flow that I generally experience at most companies around the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that same playbook needs to be deployed against this priority as well. And so yeah, I think it it feels similar in steps. I think once you get down to like how we do this really well, then I think it's probably in most cases really helpful to bring in outside resources, because You know, we all know what it looks like in the ELT meetings at most companies. And so you're going to need some outside voices for sure. But we know how to get stuff done in a company. Like, let's deploy those same tactics to the things that we're talking about here.
Can we drill?
I would love to piggyback on this, unless you got somewhere you really want to go.
I got somewhere I really want to go on this. Because like this to me is like the meat of the conversation that I would love to get highlighted, which is, all right, you have leadership, right? These executive leaders, and they say, hey, listen, we want diversity and inclusion. And again, I'll share an example from an experience that I had working at working in an area that was predominantly white. Like, I think there's like 3-4% like Black people, right, that were there in this space and time. Like, I was probably the first Black person that anybody had ever worked with in their lives, right? Or probably even came in contact with, period. So the experience that I had was like, all right, hey, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And people are saying, well, I think I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. But what ends up happening is like they're actually not. There's not that same clarity that Ryan is referring to of, here's the playbook, here are the actions that I have to take. It's like, hey, I did this one training, I grabbed my all of my women or my people of color and I put them on my website. We did, we had our Instagram post and we did our blackout thing, but there is not that same level of execution or accountability that's happening really across the board, at least from what I've seen. And so I'm really curious to hear from the group here as to like, I guess I can ask this question in one way, which is like, Ryan, like, walk me through like how Gong is going about this, right? Or if there's other folks here who have been exposed to organizations who aren't taking that same action, like, where is the breakdown exactly? And then what is the change that we have to see in order to actually manifest these aspirations that we have, right? And prove that we're putting our money where our mouth is. So I see contemplative looks across the board. I don't know if there's anyone in particular who wants to raise their hand first. Amy, I see you.
All of us.
I hit the buzzer.
In a room full of salespeople.
I know, really? It's like,
Oh.
I know. I won't go on and on, which, I could have that tendency. I will keep it concise. But I think, I was looking at one of the comments in the chat about it's not about checking boxes. However, in some cases, it has to start in an uncomfortable way to get there, to get to a place where it becomes more natural. There do have to be metrics initially, is my viewpoint, because we have to be able to hold people accountable to that change. It isn't just we wish it will happen. It's not just going to be organic. It's being intentional and being deliberate and being consistent in that approach. It's not, oh, okay, we did it, now we're done and we walk away. There isn't that, because that's where I look at the difference between diversity and inclusion. To some of the things that Roderick said, is that Roderick is, diversity is about filling the glass. Inclusion is about keeping the glass full. And if you are not an inclusive culture, you will have a glass without a bottom, and it will all the people you brought in, all the great diverse talent, if you do not instill and grow an inclusive culture, you're going to be right back where you started from. So metrics alone are not going to solve the problem. And so, however, they are necessary to hold ourselves accountable, as we do for other things, revenue metrics, pipeline metrics, all those things that we know as sellers and sales leaders. We know that those things matter. If you don't measure it, does it get done? And so we have to have a degree of measurement. It feels awkward at times to measure it, but it has to be intentional and it has to be deliberate. And then you have to build in the culture, and you hold people as examples of culture leaders and folks that are those champions in making change. It has to come from above, and it has to come from beneath in order to do that. So I think that it's really critical that it has to be very mindful, but it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. Look where we are all these years later.
I love what you just said, and I want to quickly double tap on both what you said and what Ryan said. Ryan, when you said we should treat this like the other priorities we have, I think we need to take a step back and make this a priority first before we can treat it like the other priorities. And that's been one of the problems is it's been a 1A or a 1B. No, it has to be on the same level with everything. When we're talking about revenue, we're talking about customers success and all the other metrics that we look at, diversity has to be there, but not to the point of numbers. And this is where, Amy, I want to double tap on what you said. I love that we have to have metrics, right? Because if we don't, then we're not going to be able to move the needle and we won't know how far it's moved. I think it's the lenses that we have on right now. And I'll speak broadly for Silicon Valley because I've been here for almost 30 years. And what I'm seeing is there's a lot of companies that talk about DE&I because they want to do the right thing, right? How about if we switch the lenses and said, what if we start doing the thing right instead of just trying to do the right thing? Now, that's where things start to become a priority. That's where it bubbles up. And also, we have to go deep and wide with this. It can't just be, to your point, Jacob, at the executive level. It has to be modeled at that first and second line level, because otherwise it dies on the vine. And if they don't model it and have the own the adoption, the execution, and the positive modeling at the first line level, it dies, because I think we all know the old adage, very few people leave a company, more leave a manager.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Roderick, I don't know if I like, let me know when I can pop in here, because this is the thing I was going to piggyback with Ryan earlier, and I got to blow. So there are two groups here, I feel like, on this call, right? The vast majority of people that show up to this sort of webinar, like, we're kind of preaching to the choir, right? The majority, I would say. If you're on this call and you're like, yeah, I have not been about this, I'm kind of maybe open to the idea that I should be about this, and fine, I'll show up because there are some people on the call that I respect. Glad you're here, right? Glad you're here. But we need to address these two groups differently, right? And I think by talking to the first group, will maybe help a little bit with the second. So if you're someone here, and particularly if you're an ally, and you're like, yeah, I'm about this movement, I'm nodding my head as all of you are saying the things that you're saying, like, the goal here is not for us to come around and agree on things we already agree on, right? I think the question you need to ask yourself as a next step is not, do I affirm DEI conversations when they happen? Like, congrats, like, but that's not enough to move change forward. What you need to move change forward is to be able to apprehend yourself. How do I make this case where I'm at to the people around me that I can influence, right? Like, and we're talking to salespeople here, y'all. Like, you know what it's like to build a case. You know what it's like to have a champion who's like, oh, that'd be nice, versus someone that you've equipped to be able to actually implement change management where they are with a solution that you think is relevant. So, like, if you're not getting to the point that you're able to, like, evangelize to this conversation, but you're only able to, like, say with other people that are already here, like, that's great, but that's not really doing the thing that we all need to be doing. And so the first step I would ask is, if your CEO sat down with you right now, gave you the audience, right, had his pocketbook right, like, had the company checkbook ready to go, and they're like, just one thing before I sign this check, why should we care about diversity really? If you have that 8-mile moment and you're like, it's the right thing to do, like, that's not going to do anything for someone who isn't already there. You know what I mean? So how would you go about starting to make that case? And if you don't know, that's fine. And this is where we're coming back to that second group, right? If you're on the call and you're like, yeah, I kind of want to know the case. I hope what Roderick laid out at the beginning in terms of mechanisms of what you can do is helpful. But maybe do we want to spend some time right now talking about, like, what is that case? Like, we've talked about it generally, but, like, do we want to spend a bit of time on not just, like, the moral side, but, like, what is the business imperative around, like, this sort of thing? Because I feel like that's a big part of the puzzle here for anyone who's listening who wants to move a needle after this conversation.
I'm not going to take it there. Not yet.
You're the host, girl. I got, like, yeah. I'm saying that's a key piece whenever we get to it.
And here's why. It's because there's so much literature and so many studies and so much research out there that speaks to this, right? So I'm like, if people really, really wanted to find the business case, there is a plethora of information out here, right? So, like, if it was purely a matter of, hey, we need a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, we would not be having this webinar right now. That's that's the observation that I have, right? So I think there's something different going on here, right? Where it's like, if it was a purely logical, purely profit and loss conversation, this would have been adopted much longer, like way, way, way longer ago. So I want to, because I've Shelton's ready, because I think there's something really, really key here about, there's like there's the professional corporate experience, but there's also the personal experience and the personal work that has to go on that I would love for Shelton to speak on right now.
Yeah, we got to talk about that, right? So, because I love what Ryan said about like the metrics, right? Like metrics are important. We said that, right? But I think so often we do this. We're talking about metrics and we compare apples and oranges, right? So, like from a business standpoint, like we need metrics. But this conversation around diversity and inclusion is really a social impact kind of business, right? Which has a different set of metrics. It's interesting. I find this interesting. So I didn't mention this earlier. So Rework Training is a 501c3 non-for-profit organization. And I hear this conversation all the time where organizations come to me and say they want to fix their diversity problem, but they never present metrics to me. They never talk metrics. I present metrics back and they're surprised. They're like, whoa, we came to you and it was kind of like this fluff of no metrics, right? And so they understand that they need to move beyond this intellectual exercise. They understand that they want to do the right thing, but it conflicts with the metric side of the business. I say this all the time, that you can't be diverse and inclusive professionally and not be diverse and inclusive personally, right? And so like, if we're going to do metrics, like while metrics are important to the business case, to present the business case, right? Like we need a completely different set of metrics to present this social impact aspect, right? Because until then, this conversation will always be reactive. If something happens on the news to a demographic of people, and then we react to it and say like, we need to do this, right? And we try to use business metrics and we try to use social metrics, and the two never combine, the two never meet each other. People feel bad personally from a social standpoint, but the business has to go on and the business has to make money, right? And usually where the rubber hits the road is where we feel bad, but then our bottom line goes down. And so we worry less about feeling bad from a social standpoint and more about getting our bottom line up. And so I think this conversation needs to be about how do we merge the two where we can feel good and make money. I got feel good and make money feeling good and feel good about making money, right? At the same time, if we're that's how I view it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that's actually like that's not irrelevant to the business case. Like, you ever think of like, what does it mean to get a champion to say yes to something, right? Like the win result aspect of things. Like the result is like the business objective that is tied to the thing that they're implementing or selling them on. The win though is like, there's something that they wanted in that. I don't know, like whether it's they wanted a promotion or they wanted to have their department look good or they wanted to like deal with this thing that's really annoying that they have to continually work on manually. Now they're getting automated. But like the idea that there's a win result, there's a business, and there's also something more personal wrapped up in any change that a champion actually ends up putting forward. Like being able to build that is the fullness of the business case, in my opinion. It's not just one or the other. It's always got to be intertwined with both.
Real quick. One second. Let's take a second real quick. Because I think there's because my concern at this moment is we can get so caught up in the business case that we're not talking about like the actual people who are involved here and kind of the work that's required as people, right? So there's a piece here, Shelton, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but like something that stuck out to me of what you had said during our prep conversation was that we can't be diverse professionally if we're not diverse personally, right? I'm going to give kudos to Ryan for a moment, right? So being at Gong, I'm also a co-lead of the neighborhood, which is the Black Affinity Group as well. And Ryan's our executive sponsor. One of the big things that I see as very different, what Ryan demonstrates and how he shows up is that he's incredibly receptive to the recommendations that we have, incredibly receptive to the work that we want to see, incredibly receptive to the aspirations that we have for the organization. Granted, this is for the Black Affinity Group, right? But that would extend out to many other groups as well. So I also even think about, so with my grandfather, his name's Bob Blackwell. He was at IBM as a systems engineer in the late 60s. as a Black man, right? I think he had to park in a different parking lot and worked his way up to being a branch manager, right? So he's managing hundreds, if not thousands of people, was a salesperson there. And he talked to me about there was a way of showing up at work for him, right? As a Black man, he's like, the only integration that really existed. I realize I'm talking about race right now, right? But I would imagine this can extend across multiple things. Like the only real integration that we had was in school and at work, but socially we were 100% segregated. So I think that there is this work that has to be done, right? Because it's like people. I was in a conversation recently where someone's like, "Hey, listen, I can build a completely homogeneous sales team and it works for me and I can make money," right? That person has no personal stake because they're not personally diverse, right? Or inclusive. So I think there is this work that has to be done personally. And I would even say or observe that these are things that we should even be vetting for when we're hiring leaders and hiring managers to say, hey, like, are these people who can, it's not just a matter of it's a logical business reason, but it's like a truly like human, I'm stealing this from Amy. It's a human reason as well. So like that is really the aim here, right? Here's the objective, like here's the challenge, at least from my perspective, that I think we should all really take, invite, and press forward in our organizations so that it's not just a matter of like, does it make business sense? Because I could easily make business sense for hiring somebody who looks like everybody else who's come in. But really it's like, hey, like I need to be able to open my eyes up and see that the person who I would not have ever looked at before can do this job because I've done the work to allow myself to see that as well. So like that's the piece that I think is incredibly important. And I'm gonna shift from this here for a little bit. And I'm gonna go to Amy. I'm trying to think because I had a chance to talk to Amy earlier this week for a short amount of time, but still very, very impactful. Because I think there kind of walked through how you approached hiring and how you're able to hire from places that typically I would imagine nobody would ever like look at. So I'd be curious to hear like what even informed your approach to the way that you hired and the way that you developed and promoted during that time.
Sure, thanks. And it's really taking a lot from what all of you have said in terms of where you go. And in many cases, companies have traditionally gone, I think Roderick brought it up, to the same colleges that they always have and trying to expect a different outcome. We really sort of turned it on its head and started going to other colleges for our recruiting, for recruiting diverse talent. And we realized, that BDR organization, that early in career talent, that's where we can make a huge impact on the future of our company, because these are the future leaders of our organization. And so, even going to community colleges and not just going to the name brands, and because we aren't trying to model ourselves after other companies, we're trying to also be a very unique company. And so looking at ways, we're going in terms of looking at veterans, looking at women getting back into the workforce. So it isn't just about earlier in career and colleges, because some roles do require more experience. But to go back to what someone talked about, it might have been Shelton, can't recall exactly, but about hiring people for potential, not just for experience. Do they have the potential to do the job and not count them out because they don't have the experience? And that we've found, that in the inside sales organization that I led before was the most diverse population of all the sales teams. And a lot of it had to do with opening our eyes and have just a fabulous university recruiting team that went, outside the box and wasn't just going to the same places. And so that has made a significant difference, and just built great communities that are building each other up. And so I think it takes a long time for a company, if they're really so far on one side and not being diverse, one role at a time, to be able to build the diversity. If you can get it in the masses, because that BDR organization is moving quickly through the organization, and you have an opportunity to really bring in a very, diverse talent population in all aspects, as we talk about, of diversity. And so we found that, but it goes even before that. And I think, Gabrielle, you and I spoke about that. It goes before college. We have to start educating and providing opportunities for education before people get to college to say that they want to go and do these things and provide opportunities. So that's also where you see if people are really living and breathing it as people, as humans, to Shelton's point. Are we going out to the communities to start to build, acknowledge and build awareness that what opportunities are there? And so we have to really open our minds from just the typical way that we've always been recruiting.
Amy, I love two things that you said that just light bulbed for me over here. So I want to make sure that this doesn't glance over the folks that are in the audience. One is we've got to start before they're in a company, right? And it's the company that goes out and does things in the community, but doesn't do it just so they can put it on social media or have a photo op. And that's where I go back to culture is what happens when no one is watching. It's the ones that are going out into these underserved communities and not just the communities, but underserved categories of people. And they're doing these things with the veterans, they're doing these things, et cetera. And they're not doing it because we want to put this up on our website or we want to have a nice little, sizzle reel to put out to the world. Or, you know what, when you go, make sure you call channel 5, 7, and channel 2 and make sure they're there waiting for us. No, it's because you're going out and you're doing it because you genuinely want to make this a better place and somewhat more equitable. Right? The other piece that just grabbed me was we can't keep doing things the way we've always done it. It just doesn't play anymore. I am always amazed when I go into any company and the SDR BDR group is not the most diverse group in the entire company for a couple of reasons. One, this is the opportunity to bring people in and groom them into what you want your culture to stand for and be. Secondly, these are people that are generally coming out of their first or second job or even out of college and university that are so hungry that they're ready and open to be groomed. So why wouldn't you want a diverse set of folks that then as you groom them and you culturalize them, what happens is they elevate in the organization and then you don't see things that look like this. We've got a lot of diversity up top, but nothing down here, or it's all down low. What happens in the middle? No, what happens is two things. One, diversity begins to rise up in the organization. And secondly, you've got something that is now scalable and repeatable where you replace those people down low and they rise up. If we don't do that, we're going to wind up doing the very same thing that we're doing now. Yeah, Keisha said in chat that it's the definition of insanity, doing the same things and expecting a different result. Well, guess what? It's time to break that, right? If we keep doing those things, we are going to get the same result. But it has to be something that your company lives and breathes. And it also has to be at the individual level. If you're not seeing it, go question it. I know when you're young, you're afraid to ask those questions because it could be career limiting. But as you move up into different positions, ask those questions. And if you don't ask them, you've got to ask yourself one question. Am I comfortable with making us uncomfortable? Or am I comfortable with just staying here because I have to be status quo to keep my job?
So Amy said something, right? When we talk about potential, like I want to just double back to this potential idea, right? So like potential looks differently, right? And I think it's important for leaders at the top to give their middle line managers this kind of like psychological safety to explore that potential. Because what potential looks like, so anybody here, so Cutco knives or Kirby vacuums, like anybody familiar with those things like that grind, right? Like I did that, pretty sure some of you all did that. The way I sold Kirby vacuums and Cutco knives was completely different from somebody that grew up. So I grew up in a 98% Black neighborhood. Somebody that grew up in a 98% white neighborhood that sold Cutco knives and Kirby vacuums probably did it completely different, right? And so while they did it different and that looks like potential, you can see the potential in them and the way they sold Kirby vacuums. The potential of me is going to be different. I sold a lot of Kirby vacuums and knives in my heyday, right? But it looks completely different. And I think at the top, managers the leaders have to give those middle line managers the safety of like, hey, like you're gonna have to teach differently. Like this is a different ecosystem I came from, and you got to be able to like translate and understand this ecosystem and apply these business practices to me so that I can move forward with the business, right? And so like in exploring potential, I think it requires upper management to understand like, hey, we need to give leaders the space, especially in sales, to slow down, knowing that this is going to take a little bit more time.
So Sheldon, are you saying we need to redefine what potential means?
Oh, we have to.
I think we need to also redefine what experience is, because I think we're kind of pitting them against each other, saying like it's potential or experience or something like that. But it's like, it's not cookie cutter experience. I think that's the thing that we need to break, right? Is like, hey, if you sold Cutco knives and I'm looking for somebody who needs to be gritty to do my job, like to show some perseverance and some fight to be great, like how much more than the person who's going door to door selling Cutco knives, so it's not a tech company. It's not exactly the thing that like translates perfectly over to the thing that we're doing. But in all of the areas where we look for talent to be great, you can find those things in any walk of life. And I think I think in sales, we're used to doing this. And I think like the classic version of this is like Oracle looked for ex-athletes. Like, what is that? That's looking at past experience, saying it doesn't have to look exactly like perfect sales experience. It could look like somebody who has proven that they apply themselves in a way and can be a champion, all that stuff that's wrapped up in that. So I think it's like what qualifies as experience too is really important, because it's like, we've all heard it, like it's the safe version to hire kind of the mold, but you've just eliminated, 98% of the people that are out there that could probably do your job if you just were adaptable enough to see the qualities and not just the exact experience that needs to be there for, that needs to be there for the job.
Ryan, you nailed it. For so long, especially in tech, have looked for input. I love what you just said, and I hope I can simplify it and not step over what you're saying. Let's stop looking for input and let's focus on outcome. Right? Those diverse skill sets. If success looks like this at the end, there's not one route to success. Right? It could be very different. And if you're looking for someone in a job that's going to be tough and you need someone that has that intestinal fortitude and all the other things we look for, find somebody that's done a job like Shelton was talking about, that's had doors slammed in your face and they've said no over and over and over. You're looking for somebody with thick skin, find somebody that's been through an experience like that. And now give them an opportunity to learn your way. And it's going to feel like they came out of a rocky field and they're on ice skates now when they hit your job.
Yep, totally. And I think this is very practical, right? Because what you do when you open a new job as a hiring manager is you say, here are the things that I'm looking for. And then the recruiting team goes out and gets those things. And if you put things on there like previous history of success, grit, coachability, things like that are more like their attributes or they're things that like you can show that in any way. But if you put, elite tier 4-year university, 3 years at a tech company in sales, that's a very different list of things. And so I think making sure that we're defining what we're looking for by those things that really produce the success in the job, which is, those other things, I think that's a really good start.
I got to hop in here. Partly because what's being talked about is like demonstrating as a company that you are open to having someone else demonstrate that they can get to what you're really looking for, even if it wasn't what you said you were looking for, right? So what I mean by this, my personal experience coming to Clue, I did not have the 5+ years software SaaS experience or whatever. Technically, I should not have been able to make it through the applicant tracking system or whatever. But it was an account executive at Clue that kind of vouched for me to the HR and the sales leader. And the sales leader, in our interview, the way that the interview was structured, he was supposed to ask me about previous deals in my experience that reflected the similar sales motion that they were running for. And he could realize, partway through, the presence of mind to go, that's not going to happen. He doesn't have that specific thing. And if I'm asking for that specific thing, I'm not really even giving him a shot to show why he's good for the gig. So he stopped. He looked at me. He's like, Jacob, this is what I'm supposed to be asking you for. Can't do that. But why should I continue this conversation? And I was able to pivot on a dime. Like I was able to go like, here's what it sounds like you're really looking for. Here are the things that I've done that have demonstrated that. And I did all sorts of things in my interview process. I got people in their ICP to send them like video test, the CEO and the sales director, video testimonials saying, you should hire this guy. Like if you don't, we will, like that sort of stuff. That I got to be honest with you, like not everyone who's a good hire will do all of those things all the time. But if you demonstrate that you have an openness and a willingness to have someone demonstrate success in a different way than you were looking for, people will surprise and impress you rather than thinking that they shouldn't even take their shot at it.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you for that, Jacob. I think this piece here, right, around being receptive and open-minded as to like all the different ways that success can be done, or all the different processes that you can take in order to get to that, aspired goal. I'm even thinking about, right, being an SDR, 5-6 years ago, and I like had this idea of like, this is how I'm going to be successful, and it looked like talking to someone for 20 minutes on a cold call, and one of my coworkers got a meeting in 30 seconds or less by just asking like, do you want to talk right now? And he's like, yeah, I do. I'm like, wait, why am I making my life so hard? But I also think about, right, I'm managing a team of 10 SDRs right now. And given the fact that I was in an environment when I first started off where we had so many different styles, like we had so many different people, we had so many like folks coming from different backgrounds, I got exposed to this was the tone that was set for me from the very first day of being in sales of, wow, there's so many different ways of being successful. And then in being able to have that experience, I become that much more relevant, and I can resonate that much more with whoever comes my way. So I think this piece around like it's even like being curious about what are all the different ways that, or all the things that I don't know, and like how willing am I to get uncomfortable with everything that I don't know, right? To be that much more equipped. And I think there's a piece here, like Ryan, you had mentioned this in the prep call. Shelton, you had mentioned this today a little bit about like all the different ways that we kind of have to be uncomfortable, right? From I'm saying both perspectives, like I think with Black perspective coming into a predominantly white environment. I was even like, again, I was messaging Ryan during this inclusive hiring training. And I'm like, this is a very triggering experience for me. That might not be the experience that Ryan has, but I'm like, I have to get uncomfortable and advocate for myself. And there could be times where someone like Ryan, I'm speaking on your behalf right now, sorry. But he's like, hey, GB, like I'm going to feel really vulnerable in here in this moment. I think this is the personal work that we have to do to really create the spaces that are truly inclusive. But I'd be curious to hear from folks here, whether this is from a personal experience you have of like getting outside of your comfort zone and what happened on the other side of that, or maybe this might be an opening. We can open up or brainstorm real quickly on how can we cultivate and create spaces for people to be uncomfortable for the purpose of growth, and expansion in our awareness and expansion in our ability to be relevant to all different kinds of folks.
So I said this on a prep call, and I said here, I think we're talking to salespeople. This is a sales. We're talking all things sales, right? And so I think if we take the business case of like all salespeople want to make money, right? Asking the question like, well, how do you make money? Like using sales as the point of reference to have these uncomfortable conversations, right? Where it's, hey man, I would do this differently from you. I don't understand why you would do it this way, but you clearly want to make money. I want to make money too. Let's brainstorm how we can make money together, and we'll learn something. And again, make money. That's how I think about it, because we're salespeople and we like to make money.
I love it. Any other perspectives here?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in here. So like GB said, I'm the executive sponsor for the neighborhood, which is our Black ERG. And it's super vulnerable all the time. I mean, I feel like being on this panel is super vulnerable, like I think it's, I feel like there's a recognition that there's no version of us doing this well, given that this is a deeply personal and deeply relational dynamic that we're talking about here. And by the way, we're talking about, histories of atrocities that we're trying to like live in now and figure out what the hell we all do. And so I think there's no version of this where it feels comfortable. And I think that's just like, you almost got to accept that up front and then dive in accordingly, because I think there's like, I remember I'll share one. There was a session that we held at LinkedIn that was, around diversity, inclusion, belonging, DIBS is what we called it back then. And honestly, like the facilitator, I was the leader of the organization, and the facilitator made a total blunder. I mean, and it was like, the most marginalized people in the group felt the most exposed, and the heart was right. Like the intention was there, but the execution just was not there. And it took 3 weeks of cleanup, and it still wasn't full restored trust on the other side. And so I think it's like, we're going to do the best we can, but I don't know, maybe I'll put it out to the panel. I don't feel like there's a version of this where it doesn't get to the point where we're having to like say, hey, when that happened, that wasn't cool for me. And like, here, let me tell you how I experienced that, and I think getting really good at that, by the way, I'll shut up in a second, but like, I think getting really good at that as a leader of what does it look like to put yourself in the seat of somebody else and be like, how is that person experiencing what's going on right now? That is leadership, period. So I think when we're hiring leaders, if a leader is not able to do that, that's the version of toxic leader that we've all had, that is oblivious of the impact they're having on their environment and just keeps going. And like, that's just like leadership 101. But I think to be really, I think we're all growing and trying to get more and more advanced in like, what does it look like for me to lead knowing the impact I'm having as I'm moving? And I think that's kind of a forever skill, or I feel like that for me. So those thoughts.
Yeah. What you're saying about, even being here, it's vulnerable, and it's extremely uncomfortable, especially when you tout yourself as feeling like you're inclusive and do the right things, and then people maybe challenge you, or then you're not really sure how to respond in a certain situation. So when a lot of the things really kind of hit hard on the BLM movement, I mean, and it's going on forever, but classified with a lot of the angst that has been going on in our country. And as a white person and a woman where I have some degree of relatability, I admit I cannot relate in the same way. And that's really hard when you know that you can't, and anything you say, you feel like, do I call my Black employees and say, how are you? Are you okay? But then that's awkward, because then I'm calling it out, and then it's weird. And then some of us get together and say, well, should we call? Should we not? What do we do? And so it is incredibly uncomfortable and vulnerable, because you're not really sure what the right thing is to say to anybody, quite frankly, of a diverse population. I'm in one of the categories, but just by saying, oh yeah, I know what you feel because I'm a woman. No, I don't. I didn't grow up. I did grow up in a very homogenous community, and there was busing to other communities of schools and things like that, and fear that came across your parents' eyes when they said, I don't want my child bused over there. I'm like, I don't know, what is this? And so, and you just get different inputs. And so it is incredibly uncomfortable, because when you're on one side or the other, there isn't a side, but it feels like there are sometimes these sides. You don't really know what to do. And so many people, sometimes myself included, do nothing because I'm too scared. I'm too scared to say the wrong thing. And I think that's where companies have a huge opportunity to help, is to make it okay just to do what you feel like, just make that step. And so, just Ryan, it just kind of struck a chord with me in terms of, it is uncomfortable, even when you hold yourself in a certain regard that I feel like I'm open and all those things, but I still am who I am. And I have my own experiences that won't change, but how my view, can be opened up to what others have, experienced.
Oh, Amy. I don't know what's going on in 2021, but I'm a lot more emotionally expressive. But that was thank you for sharing that, because there's I I've had conversations with folks in the past, right, where I wish they had said what you had said, right? It's like this is incredibly, it can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable for someone like me to be in an organization and see nothing but, let's say, white men being promoted. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, what is there space for me? And what happens? Can I actually advocate for myself, or will I come off a certain way? Right. So I don't, like, even in that, I don't advocate for myself. So it seems like there's a similar, I'll say it's almost like a similar like intellectual or emotional signature that's there of like wanting to do something for the folks who are, like, they're inclined to do that, but there's this pausing, there's this stopping. And so I think this is, and even if I think about like what did I want out of this conversation? And I know we only have like 18 minutes left. It really was to kind of like come a bit to this point here and think through what is our personal responsibility and what is the work that's required of all of us. And I'll kind of stop with my story, and I would love to hear from whether it's Shelton or Roderick or Jacob here, of like even just hearing the experiences of like sales, like people who are in sales leadership position who identify as white, right, saying like, I don't know what to do here, right? I don't know what to do in these situations. Like, what would you want to see from somebody in this position who did identify with them?
Come volunteer at rework is what
Yeah.
like. I'm plugging
There it
myself.
is. I was just about to point to Shelton.
And the reason I got to say that, and I'll go back to what I said earlier about you can't be diverse and inclusive professionally and not be diverse and inclusive personally, right? I feel like allies don't take full advantage of allyship. Like, don't just be an ally at work, because if you're only an ally at work, that's when those blunders happen, right? Like if we're allies to the fullest extent, like when people come to rework, when we're off the clock, we ask those uncomfortable questions, and it's a little less uncomfortable because the spotlight's not on you, right? The spotlight is not on you to make a blunder in front of your whole company. You get to ask me one-on-one. You get to ask Jacob one-on-one. You get to ask Roderick one-on-one, and it's way less offensive because we're allies. Like you represent, like you're my ally off the clock, and we can grab a beer and talk about some things and get perspective from one another, so that when we go back to work, it's not the same pressure. It's how I think of it.
I want to double tap on that last piece that Shelton was talking about. And I'm going to say something that's going to make people uncomfortable. So I'll put it out there now. And it's probably may not even be a popular thing to say, but it needs to be said. I would rather you come and ask us rather than do nothing. If you are a true ally, come ask us. Because when you do nothing, I'm going to tell you, you may not know, but we take it as you being complicit. And you may not be. That's giving the wrong perception. So I want to honor Amy and Ryan both for your support in this, and also for your vulnerability today, because it takes a lot to come onto a panel, especially with 4 other A++ personalities on here right now. Let me get to the uncomfortable part, and I want to say this with as much love as I possibly can. Shelton said you have to be an ally at work and at home, away from work. Okay. If you are not comfortable having this conversation, it's because you have friends that are Black. When you get comfortable having these conversations, it's because you have Black friends. You got to cross that line. And at some point, and crossing that line means asking those questions that you may think are going to come off wrong, or they're going to make you look bad. No, they're not. Say, look, I'm asking because I want to learn. I'm asking because I haven't had the experience you have. And Amy, I'll say this directly to you, back to your point. The way that it's come to me, and I've accepted it the most, is I'm coming to ask just because I want to learn, and I don't want to assume. There is no one on the planet that's going to push back on that, of you being authentic and you being open to learn. Now, I'm going to say this to the people of color specifically. When people come and ask those questions, be prepared to give a real answer, but give it in love, because they are coming to try and learn and try to be that ally. And you may be the only person that they have that, as I said, you're not just a friend that's Black, you're a Black friend. So be that friend when those questions come to you. Be real and answer the questions, but answer the questions because they're trying to learn and teach. And they can take it. We can't make this change. We literally can't. It has to be people that don't look like us that are going to push and continue to push, because they're in rooms and houses where we don't even know there's a door.
Yeah, and just to your point, that when I was not sure, I did call one of my leaders, and And I said, I don't really know what to say. Not really sure. I'm not sure what the right thing is to say, but I'm thinking about you. And I don't know what is going on in your world. And he said, thank you. And then just shared a personal story about his own son and lessons that he's had to tell his son and fears that he has every day that his son walks out the door. And so to your point, it was a huge lesson. And I think, and he was very, I think, appreciative, even though I didn't know what to say. I just called and said,
That the fact that you
I just said, I
meant
don't know
more
what
than the
to
words.
say, but just that you're on my mind.
And
The fact that you picked up the phone meant far more than the words you said.
and so like I gotta keep pushing this allyship forward, right? Because I feel like we again create this one-way street where it's like, all right, I got I don't know, let me call it, can I as a black friend, as a black person, I got questions I want to ask the white people about. Like, I grew up in a 98% all black environment. I got questions like, man, what's bro culture? I remember I asked one of my, like, what is this bro culture? I don't understand it. Like, we need to, like, we got to make this a whole two-way street of like uncomfortable safe spaces to be ignorant on both sides, right? Because I got a lot of ignorant questions that I'll be wanting to get out, and I need the same psychological safety that my white friends have when
I'll give you my number. We can chat.
Let's do it, because I got some questions.
You got my number.
If I can lob a little bit, I mean, at the core of what we're asking in this question is like, how do we create trust, right? Like we're all in this situation where we're fighting to create a context to trust, and how do we do that? And I think, especially when you think about promoting people to sales leadership, to Roderick's point earlier about like, someone's crushing their numbers, oh, they must be ready to be a manager. Like, well, this is a lot of that. Like, how do I create a context of trust and lead somebody? Like that EQ stuff in relationship, like that's a lot of what this gig is. So I'm assuming that if you're in leadership, you've either demonstrated some of that in other contexts or you want to, and you get that that's important. So, I mean, from there, once you recognize that, and also the dynamic of like, if you're a leader and there's someone who you're leading, you're also trying to create trust in a context where people who have been in your shoes before maybe have broken trust with that person. And so you're coming in with that context as well. I mean, like the first thing you got to do is demonstrate to the individual that you really seriously, sincerely value them. They're not just, a stat to you. They're not just a quota. They're not just like you actually value them as an individual, and you want to help them perform well in their job and flourish and all that sort of stuff. But you also care about them as an individual. Beyond that, like you need to take action that reflects that value of them as an individual. So some of this stuff you can learn a little, like generally, like there are too many books and articles and videos and things like that to name to learn the basics of this conversation, the 101 type stuff. And then once you maybe gone through some of that, like, no individual black people, we're not a monolith, right? Like the way you relate to Shelton on this topic, the way you relate to my brother on this topic, the way you relate to, someone else on your team on this topic, it could be different. But once you got some of those foundations, then you relate to them as an individual and go, hey, I know this thing has happened. I don't know how you feel about it or how you would want to, I don't know what makes sense in relating to you in this conversation, but I care about you. Like, is there something that you would want to see from me or that I could be saying or doing? Like, how can I come alongside you? I think that action that reflects that value of them, the humility to admit when you get it wrong, and then time, like those are the ingredients of building trust in a relationship.
I'm just over here enjoying this. Thanks, y'all. I was like, I've been waiting to have a conversation like this for like 6 years. This is amazing. I know we have like 9 minutes left. So for the folks who are still here, the attendees, feel free to drop some questions that we can ask. I would love to maybe just like take this moment. I call it the Shavasana moment where, at the end of a yoga practice, you let the practice settle in, and let it integrate. But I think one of the big things, and I would love to hear from everyone, like maybe what's like the one takeaway or one big highlight that you took from this or that you would want others to really focus on. But for me, one of the things that I wrote down is like the difference between kind of like I recognize we're salespeople. I recognize that we build the business case, right? But I think there's a difference between like building the business case, having the check boxes, right? Doing that kind of work. And I care a lot about leadership, but really demonstrating like true and honest leadership, which is like hey, I'm going to be okay with not knowing the answers. I'm going to be okay with extending myself. Like I'm going to be all right. Like not always knowing what to do or to sound off or whatever else it is, but really to encapsulate what it means to be a true leader. Like this is part of it, right? It's not just about, again, increasing representation, even though that's a foundational element of it, but it's also extending myself as a person and doing the work required to truly be like anyone, like to be someone that anybody would feel comfortable calling a leader as well. So that was just one big piece that like really hit me and that I took note of. And I appreciate each of you for co-creating in that realization. But again, would love to hear from y'all on like maybe how this conversation hit you, or again, like what's something that you would want to make sure that people walk away with today.
I think for me, really what Shelton was, talking about, the personal versus the professional. And I pride myself in certain ways of being open and authentic, whatever that means, and all these things. But life outside of work, am I going that extra step, to really embrace the personal side of the equation? And really, what does allyship mean? Because a lot of people talk about, it's not about participating in a demonstration or doing some of the things that we had all talked about. Not that that isn't something you can do, but it's not about the check the box kinds of things, but it's about here. And it's what you and I talked about the other day. It's about the heart. It's about the human piece, and really integrating all of that into your person, not your profession. Because it's a lot bigger than I am, even in the professional world. But what I really can impact with myself is that personal side. So that really resonated with me, and really at a very unexpected outcome of this for me.
So that means I'm gonna see you next week volunteering at rework. I'm calling you.
Call me, man. Call me. I just connected with you on LinkedIn, so
I'm excited.
You can find me.
I guess I'll go next. I think for me, so I mean, with these conversations, I know that this isn't where like the real work happens, right? This is a culmination of work we've been doing already, and we're like pit stopping having this conversation. There's more work to do, and so I think if you're listening to this conversation, whatever side of the fence you on, I think the next step, if you're trying to figure out as a manager, what's my next step, right? If you're a white manager, it's like, hey, you got a whole bunch of folks that are willing to have this psychologically safe conversation with you. The reverse is also true. So if you're a black person and looking to next step and you're trying to figure out what's missing, I think that the leadership on this team is more than happy to have, again, a psychologically safe conversation with you. And so I think for me, the biggest takeaway is like, past this call, like reach out, like that one-on-one conversation off the books needs to be had on both sides of the fence, and be okay with it. It'll be less scary than you think.
Love that. Jacob, I see you off mute.
Yeah, I just forgot to mute myself, but I'll go. A large part of the reason why we created Sales for the Culture was because we wanted Black people to be able to have a space to have these conversations with one another, and also to be able for white organizations and sales leaders to be able to like dialogue with the Black tech selling community around like, what does it mean to do this thing better together? Because I don't know, where someone's at coming into this conversation and listening, but I hope what you're walking away with is we're on the same team. We are working together for the same goal. Like we want people to do well. We want our businesses to do well. We want to do that well together, and we don't, any one of us have all the answers. So how do we come together to have that chat? So, I mean, I highly recommend volunteering at Rework to personally diversify if you're a white person. If you're a Black person, I would hop in Sales for the Culture. If you're a white organization, we'll circle back with you, but you can put it on our radar that you want to be able to have these conversations with us. We're excited to walk alongside you in it. Just keep running the race with endurance. That's what I would say.
I'll jump in. I want to raise the level as we walk away from this, from just the ethnicity piece, right? I look at my family and I see a rainbow of Baskin Robbins across the family, from color and gender. I was raised by 7 sisters, so I have a different mindset than I'm sure a lot of leaders that go in that are doing hiring. We've got veterans, we've got LGBTQ across my entire family. So I want to raise this up just for a moment beyond just the ethnicity piece. And I want to say this: we all have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? This is not an easy conversation. I applaud those that are still on here. I applaud everyone that's on the panel that has been open and transparent and vulnerable, right? We've got to get to that level where we continue having these conversations, but to Shelton's point, it can't just be a conversation. It's got to be some action behind this. There has to be a walk away and go, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to go and do this better. And I want to talk to my leaders on here just for a moment. I've found something that I have been using for years now that literally levels the playing field for everyone across my teams, but at the same time, it raises their level of openness, and it also gives them the spotlight and takes it off of me as a leader. And GB and I talked about this the last time we talked. I start every meeting with a simple 3-part question. And it's not for me, it's for the other individual. And that question is this: do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach? Or do you want me to fix? It's amazing how that will just bring the walls down and allow that other individual to know that this conversation is about you. It's not about me. And as leaders, we are natural fixers. It's not always what's needed, right? Sometimes it's just, can I get this out of my head? Hey, have you tried this different? Or I've tried everything. Just tell me what to go and do. But ask that same question to everyone on your team, no matter what they look like, no matter where they come from, because the answer is going to be different at different times. Don't go out there assuming that you know your team. We all do as leaders. I know my people. I know how they're going to come. No. Ask that question and allow them to drive the conversation. And for a moment as a leader, step back and remember how we got here. We got here because we listened, then we learned, now we lead. And I'll leave it at that.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Roderick. I think Ryan, you're going to close us out here before we close out the conversation, or at least the recording.
First of all, this has been amazing. So thank you. GB, I didn't know you had such skills in terms of hosting like this, but I should have known. So forgive me.
I took notes when you were talking to Angela Duckworth.
But yeah, just thanks to everybody else on the panel too. This has been really, really awesome. And I appreciate you guys hosting me. I think for me, you said one thing, like, what's the one thing? It really struck me in this conversation, just again, how important that frontline manager is. I think Jacob called it out earlier. And for me, the lens that I have is I'm running an organization where we're hiring managers all the time. And I think the manager is a point of leverage to make quick change. And so I'll use my single moment in 1 minute to talk to the other senior sales leaders on the call and say, stop hiring managers that are only good managers to a few groups, a few select people, like start hiring with empathy and high EQ and genuine care about diversity in articulation of why it's important. Like these are some of the things that like we can start to layer into our interview process. And I think if we're able to make an impact at the frontline level, I think it's an accelerator. So yeah, let's not allow that to be a bonus part. Like, oh yeah, they're kick-ass and all these there. Oh yeah, and they got this thing over here. It's like, no. Hire leaders that are compassionate, high EQ, care about creating diverse environments that people feel welcomed in, have high levels of hospitality, those types of things. And I think it'll go a long way for us.
Awesome. Well, I know we are just 1 minute over, y'all. So we did great on timing. We used this 90 minutes very well. So thank you, each of you, for being here. For the attendees who stuck around for the entire time as well, thank you for being here as well. There's no next steps until Brooklyn and I have our little powwow, but we'll see what's going on here. But other than that, thank you everyone for being here. Thanks again, and have a great day.